Hey everybody, I'm coming to you from Tennessee today. I know the background's not the normal thing you see in my headquarters that I usually produce from, but I'm on travel for some family issues, and as I said, I'm actually going to be out of the country here later in the week. But there's some things continuing to happen on the ground in Russia. Actually, a lot of things happening, and I don't want to wait days to keep you updated because I know you need the ground truth, and that's what we're here to give you. First of all, the big news again today is that the Russians continue to move south from their attack into the northern part of Ukraine, north of Kharkov area. And especially there's two basic thrusts that are going on. One basically just north of Kharkiv, a little bit to the east of that, and then to the west, centering on a town called Volchansk. You're going to be hearing about that a lot in the news and later in this same episode here, because that seems to be one of the primary objectives of the initial thrust here. And we're going to talk about how that fits into the bigger picture as we go on here today. But first of all, I want to show you, this is a video of what President Zelensky said yesterday, kind of giving the implication that, hey, don't worry about this, we got it all covered.
Our forces must achieve maximum results to destroy our enemy everywhere. Today, there were reports from our Commander-in-Chief, Alexander Syrsky. We are strengthening our positions, especially in the Kharkiv region, by deploying additional forces. The artillery is operating exactly as planned.
So again, if you saw our last update, his body language isn't exactly filling us with a lot of confidence that he actually believes the things that he's saying, and for good reason. Gary, if you can put that first map up there, because you can see that, you know, this is territory. All these things in the white are things that have been taken just within the last few days, and it continues to move further to the south. You see there's those two areas I told you about, one in the east and the other around Volchansk. And it continues to move further down. There's some problems with how rapidly this has moved so far. You know, the war has been, especially this year and even some to last year, has been characterized a lot by slow movements and incremental changes here and there, and meters potential here. Sometimes it gets slowed down. This one has been surprising many people with how rapidly they pushed, in some places up to 10 kilometers deep, over a front of now expanding the total of about 20 kilometers wide. And by all accounts, so far, the main forces of the Russian forces have not yet been engaged. These are what's called reconnaissance in force. I used to be a reconnaissance officer with what we call the Armored Cav Squadron, where you would be required to go and enforce to find out where the enemy defenses were, find out what their dispositions were, and then the main forces would follow on behind. Once you've identified where the weaknesses are, then they would come in. Ordinarily, the cavalry units, the reconnaissance units, would come in and they would just make minimal gains, basically to find out where the enemy is, and then they would bring the bigger forces in. But in this case, the reconnaissance forces themselves have had significant success and results in relatively small numbers. And that's, of course, raising a big question. How could this be? How, after more than 2 years of warfare and knowing that Russia has had forces up in this portion of the front for many, many months, and there's been warnings from the Ukrainian intelligence that they're going to open up a northern offensive at some point, where are all the defenses? That's a big question that a lot of other people are asking. And in fact, here is the head of the Volchansk area asking some of those. Actually, no, this particular one here, the head of the Volchansk defensive area, is showing you how heavy the firepower is in this area.
The situation is extremely difficult because the enemy has been conducting mass shelling of the town, terrorizing the civilian population, destroying the town. They use artillery and multiple launch rocket systems. There were 30 airstrikes just in the last day. There's a lot of destruction.
And that is leading to a little bit more eyes being opened by the president. So the clip I showed you a second ago was from yesterday. Here's a clip of today where he's actually, for the first time, and I've seen it in a long time, being pretty honest about what he's facing.
Special attention is paid to the Kharkiv region. Defensive battles are ongoing, fierce battles on a large part of our border area. There are villages that have actually turned from a gray zone into a combat zone, and the occupier is trying to gain a foothold in some of them, or simply use some of them for further advancement. In particular, on the outskirts of Volchansk, the situation is extremely difficult. The city is under constant Russian fire, and our military is carrying out counterattacks, helping local residents. We are also paying constant attention to other areas of combat operations, including the Donetsk sector, where the situation is no less intense. In fact, the idea behind the attacks in the Kharkiv region is to spread our forces thin and undermine the moral and motivational basis of the Ukrainians' ability to defend themselves. The Pokrovsk direction is the most difficult, despite everything.
You know, as I've been telling you for a long time, it's not the money, it's the men. It's not the machines, it's not even the ammunition, it's the manpower issue. And that is absolutely playing out in a very stark way right now. Ukraine simply doesn't have the manpower to be able to handle this additional front and move reinforcements. I'm going to show you some graphic reasons why that is in just a second. But that underlies the weakness of the Ukraine side, even in addition to having they're being outgunned and out ammunitioned by the Russian side here. And I think probably one of the big questions that Zelensky himself is asking is, where was my defenses? Where were the people that were supposed to stop this invasion? And here is the reconnaissance leader for the Ukrainian side. I'm going to show you in just a second where he's asking some of the same questions. He was interviewed, I believe it was on BBC earlier today, about saying, hey, what's going on up here? And he's asking these same questions.
Ukrainian officials insist they were ready. Not everyone agrees. This drone footage appears to show Russian troops crossing the border unopposed.
There was no first line of defense. We saw it. The Russians just walked in. Where were the minefields? They just walked in.
Look, if anybody ever had any doubt about how powerful a good defense can be, they should have looked at the Ukrainian offensive in 2023, because Russia spent about 6 months to 9 months in some areas of the front building these elaborate defensive fortifications, multiple lines all the way across. Now, I've been hearing and reading from Ukrainian media for months, going back into last year, that toward the end of the year, when they finally gave up and acknowledged that the offensive didn't work, that they started building defensive positions. And in the first, especially January, February, I read lots of reports about how they were strengthening up the entire border because they saw this growing force that the Russians were building, a northern army, being very open about what was coming. And so the assumption is, my assumption was, that they were doing the same things the Russians did, and that there would be very heavy minefields, there would be tank ditches, there would be dragon's teeth, all these kinds of things that I fully expected. But now that you see that video there, the guy literally walked across the field. I mean, those platoons. And that apparently is not isolated. That is happening all across there. And there simply haven't been the defensive positions. It's as though they don't exist, or they don't exist in sufficient quantities or quality. So now then, when you have Russia coming in this far, as Zelensky pointed out in his second one there, they are moving reinforcements from other parts of the front. Here's the problem. They don't have theater reserves. They don't have enough people that they can take entire brigades and move them from one place to another, or that they were out of contact, waiting in case there had been a breakthrough, which is normal military procedure, so that you can fill in the gaps, not sort of a fire brigade type environment, to where if something broke out, you have somebody ready right now as a fire truck to go and put that fire out. There don't seem to be any. So what Ukraine's doing instead is they're taking people from the other parts of the front, and they're taking the brigades that are there, and they can't afford to take entire brigades out of the line because Russia already has a lot of pressure all along that front line. And so they can't go back and just take them away. They don't have any new ones. So what are they going to do? This illustrates the problem. You see that Russia's already all along those lines. Now, just forgive me here. This is from a Ukraine source, so these are not in English, but that's Kharkiv in the area around the blue in the upper left-hand corner. You see that yellow arrow up there. That's Kharkiv, and then the right-hand side there is the Kupiansk area, the northern part of the eastern front that we've been talking about so much here. This illustrates the problem. Ukraine is taking those yellow arrows are troop movements. So they are going to have to figure out the brigades that they have defending their front up there, which, by the way, in the northern sector has been quite successful. They're going to have to now move reinforcements from elsewhere up to there. But since they don't have entire brigades, they're going to have to take like squads or platoons from each of the individual brigades to move them up there. And it's a desperate situation, because if Ukraine doesn't put them up there fast, the city of Kharkiv could be surrounded very, very quickly, much more quickly than anybody would even imagine, based on how the war has gone the first 2+ years of this war so far. So that, though, shows the real problem. And I think why Zelensky was concerned in that second video, because that means that the other areas of the front, Gary, if you can throw that map back up there again, that shows that these other areas, like especially around Kupiansk, where it's so important. The other one, Gary. The one you had just a second ago. That one. All right, I'll pick it back up from here.